What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate Podcast as part of the Man Cave Podcast. That's brought to you by Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Dan Casper here with you as always. They did it. Brian Gutekunst, Packers general manager, made every Packers fan happy out there. They signed a veteran wide receiver. Okay, I'm being a little sarcastic in this, and it makes it sound bad on Mecole Hardman, but it's obviously not DK. It's they didn't trade for him. They didn't sign Chris Godwin. Those type of players. So let's talk about this signing for Hardman, Mecole Hardman. He has spent the majority of his career with Kansas City. Was a second-round draft pick in 2019. He did spend a hot minute with the Jets, first year with Rodgers when they were trying to load up with talent and such, but then ends up going back to the Chiefs. Not properly utilized with the Jets. Chiefs, Andy Reid knows how to use them. You look at the stats, you look at his numbers, dude's never gone over 1,000 yards. Nothing really kind of jumps out to you. So, why did the Packers make this move to sign Mecole Hardman? One, boosting the return game. He is a former All-Pro for the return game. And with Keyshawn Nixon saying that he doesn't want to do, returns anymore or anything like that, well, I think Hardman would do that. And he is a factor in that. He is a playmaker in that department. But as we know, teams can take that away with the kickoff rule and such. So we'll see how much of a factor he is over there. He's not obviously the biggest receiver. I think listed about 5'10", but he's got speed. And as Mickey from Rocky and Rocky 2 says, speed is what we need. Got to have speed. Greasy, fast speed. So the Packers bringing him in, hopefully will properly utilize that speed. How do you properly utilize that speed? Well, let's take a look at how the Chiefs kind of utilized him a lot. You're going to probably see, now, if Matt LaFleur and the Packers use him the same way, a lot of maybe some bubble screens, some wide receiver screens, some throws close to the line of scrimmage, getting the ball in his hands and letting him run and making some plays with his legs. That is what, and it's not to say he wasn't a downfield threat or anything like that, but he is a guy that you probably want to get the ball in his hands as soon as possible and just let him outrun everybody and utilize his skills that way. So kind of a short area, hopefully potential yak type of guy. Yards after catch, yards after contact type of guy. He's not a number one, and he won't be a number one in Green Bay. If anybody has that expectation, let's lower the expectations, okay? Let's temper those. I don't think it changes the need for Green Bay to head in this draft to still target a wide receiver. I still think that's on the table and maybe fairly early. And part of that still is, too, because, remember, Watson and Dobbs are scheduled to be free agents after this year. But he is an interesting piece where I think the big question now is, how does LaFleur use him? And will LaFleur use him the right way? Because you go back, and I was doing this last night, but you go back and you look at some of the highlights for Hardman, and you got jet sweeps. You've got, some of those moves. And I think if you asked a lot of Packers fans, you go back to, was it year one under LaFleur, and we got a lot of jet sweeps, Swervin Irvin, Tyler Irvin, and that, and they tried it with Tavon Austin a little bit, and haven't done it as much. They did it a little bit with Christian Watson to try to utilize his speed, and Bo Melton, and even Jaden Reed to an extent. Hardman's better at that than those guys. So I would fully expect you're going to see Mecole Hardman a lot in motion. I think you're going to see him involved with maybe some of those jet sweeps, or even in motion, fake jet sweep, and then a swing out pass to him towards the sideline and just let him run. As I mentioned, some bubble screens, some wide receiver screens and that. So getting him the ball and getting him the ball in space. But I think you're going to see this guy being utilized as kind of a gadget player, a Swiss Army knife type, however you want to phrase it. But he's not going to be a guy, I hope, and I hope I'm wrong, and maybe he blows the doors off this thing, and he goes over 1,000 yards this year. But I wouldn't have that expectation. And I don't think, he's not going to be that numero uno target. But he does provide depth, and he does provide competition within the room, within that wide receiving room. And to be fair, he's probably not even a guarantee to make the roster. I mean, I don't want to get into a 53-man roster prediction right now, but a lot's going to depend on, I think, the structure of the contract too. So, but he's not a Sammy Watkins. First of all, he's still only 27 years old. He's not a Devin Funchess. Those type of guys that were, back end of their careers. You're hoping to maybe get another year out of them. This is a guy that could do more, and he's younger. So I know that comparison was kind of being thrown. I was like, another Sammy Watkins type of signing or that. Guy's younger. He's still a threat in the return game, and I think he can provide a little bit more to the style of offense. It's just the question is, can LaFleur tap into that potential? Can he properly utilize Mecole Hardman? Can he create those mismatches? Can he create those misdirections? Mecole Hardman might be a guy, too, that just kind of helps set up things for some other guys. Whether it's a Tucker Kraft, whether it is a Jaden Reed. Helps out Josh Jacobs in the run game. I mean, I could see, I'm already envisioning it, these plays. And we saw them before. But, it's a fake, maybe jet sweep to Mecole Hardman. And it's a simple handoff to Josh Jacobs. But you're creating that misdirection. And you're making that linebacker take that one step the other direction to account for Mecole Hardman. And he's got that speed, so the defense is going to respect it. And maybe that's that yard, that inch, that makes a difference for a big run for Josh Jacobs. So if, again, I know I keep preaching this, but this is, I think, the biggest question. If he is properly utilized, if Matt LaFleur properly utilizes him, he can affect this offense. He can make a difference in this offense. He's not going to make a difference like a DK Metcalf or Jamar Chase, whatever, the top flight receivers out there. He's not going to have that type of difference, but he can have an impact if he is properly utilized. And that, to me, is going to be the big question now. And we won't know that until the season starts, right? We're not going to know that. But I would imagine if I'm Matt LaFleur now and I've got my offensive coaches and I'm huddling up here, I'm like, okay, we got this toy for our offense. We can do a couple different things now with it. What are the best ways we can do this? What should we do? How do we play with this new toy? Like what kind of packages can we come up with? Because I would imagine LaFleur and his staff, Adam Stenovich and such, they're going to be watching a lot of Chiefs film and looking at how Andy Reid and the Chiefs really used him and looking at ways to do it similar, but maybe expanding a little bit or maybe adding on to it a little bit. So I don't mind the signing. To me, it's like, okay, it's kind of a meh. It's like, okay. He's a speed guy. He's a returner. You can utilize him in certain packages. He's not going to be the greatest run blocker, and we know LaFleur likes his receivers to be run blockers. So, I mean, he's probably not going to be involved in that too much. But he can have an effect for a few plays a game. But ultimately, too, this does not change, in my opinion, does not change the need that Green Bay has to still potentially look at the draft for adding some more receiver depth, more help. And maybe this changes things a little bit in terms of the type of receiver that they are going to look at. If there's one thing that it would change, it maybe changes. Like, okay, we got our speed guy now. Maybe we could get with a bigger target who's more of a downfield guy. maybe it changes it in that aspect. But I'm curious. I think the best way for me to describe this is like maybe I'm a little curious. I'm a little meh, but I'm a little curious to see how it all works. Because I would like to see Green Bay get back to doing, the misdirections and and they did a little bit this past year. I don't want to say they completely abandoned it, but I would like to see them, the Tyler Irvin, Swervin' Irvin days where it was like, oh yeah, a little bit. And we saw some of the misdirection this season where it was like fake handoff this way, fake handoff that way. I mean, the quarterback had to be on like a 360 swivel to get that run. I mean, it was such a timing thing, and it had a lot of success. And now you add in a little bit more of an element with Hardman to this. It confuses the defense. It puts them in a bind, and that's the ultimate goal as an offensive coordinator, as the offense, right? You want to make things difficult on the defense, and you want to make the defense account for a lot of different players and not just focus on a player or two to try to slow them down. And you've got a guy now that you can run around all that whole field and try to confuse a defense. But it all circles back to the one thing. Will they do that? Will they properly utilize that? Will they use him in the right way? I think LaFleur will. I think he will. I think he will put him in a spot or put him in certain ways that he will affect the game and he will help the offense. Again, I'm not expecting 800, 900,000 yards receiving from Hardman. I'm not expecting that from him. But I am expecting him to have a positive impact on this team. Because, I mean, let's face it. You look at last year, and it's not eye-popping numbers, right? For what he did with the Chiefs. It's not like, holy cow. He played 12 games, 12 catches on 14 targets, 90 yards. Okay. 2023 overall, 11 games between the Jets and the Chiefs. 2022, he had 297 yards on 25 targets. I mean, his first 3 years of his career, those were his best years from a receiving standpoint. 2019, 538 yards and 6 touchdowns. 2020, 560 yards, 4 touchdowns. 2021, 83 targets, 693 yards. In those 3 years, he played every single game. But the last couple, 8, 11, and 12. So he's been a little bit banged up. And you look at the rushing numbers, too, and it's like the most he's ever ran the ball. 62 yards for 5 carries last year. 62 yards is the most he's had in rushing. So you're probably thinking, like, okay, like how much are they actually going to use him in the running game in that? I could see Hardman setting career highs for running the football this year on some jet sweep action. Or those little shovel passes that we see. Those count as passes. So, I mean, it's a little, don't necessarily look at just like the box score, right? Don't look at those and be like, oh, dude only ran for 62 yards last year for 5 carries. What are you talking about? That's how the statisticians take that. Those little shovel passes, those like count as a pass in that. So, I think it's going to be. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic that he can be a nice fit within this offense. Not a big boost like some of the top wide receivers out there, but he could be a nice fit.